We're here at the Elastic Public Sector Summit here in Washington, D.C., and we have the perfect person to talk to, the head of public sector work here for Elastic, Chris Townsend. Chris, this is such an exciting time, and I don't mean exciting in a great way necessarily, but such an exciting time to be dealing with efficiency in government systems, which is what Elastic's all about, and probably some opportunities are available now that weren't available before. Talk to me about how you're telling the story of efficiency and Elastic software in 2025.
Yeah, great question, and thank you so much for having me on and your time today. So all of our government agencies are trying to operationalize data, and they're trying to operationalize their data to solve mission problems, whether it's improving security posture, whether it's improving care and service to the veteran, whether it's fraud detection, law enforcement. There's just, as you heard in a lot of the interviews today, there's just an unending number of use cases for using generative AI, data, to be able to solve mission problems in government and to build efficiencies. The other side of that, the challenge is the volume of data, right? So there's a real cost.
And I think that's unique in business.
Yeah.
Like I think the volumes of government data are so much greater and underutilized than the lesser volumes and maybe better utilized private sector data.
100% correct. And the reason for that is our government agencies, their infrastructure is so complex and the data is so siloed, it's hard for them to access and index all of that data. And what happens in private sector often is you take all of that data and you put it into a common architecture, you replicate that data and move it all. In government, you can't, let's look at the DoD, for example, across the Department of Defense. You can't take the Air Force data, the Marine Corps data, the Army data, and put it all into one organization, nor would you want to, and the services wouldn't want to. So how do you index that data locally and search it from a centralized location to be able to, again, support the mission needs?
That's an interesting problem.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that Elastic is uniquely capable of delivering because of our, we started out as an open source company back in 2010, and then we offered a paid version of software in 2012 and grew to over $1 billion just by customers coming to us and saying, hey, we want to use the supported version of the software. But we really weren't out there telling our story. I always joke we're the best kept secret in tech. And what really makes us unique, because of that open source background and because we support open standards, we're really efficient in how we handle that data and solve some of those data volume problems for customers.
It is a really interesting problem. What is it about, we can go into the weeds if you like.
Sure.
We'll see how far you can take it.
Yeah.
But what is it about Elastic software that allows you to, I love your example of services where you can take Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, whatever, keep the data set separate, but make it apply the same searches or whatever to it.
Yeah, so I'll try not to get too in the technical weeds, but we can take Elastic clusters. I'll give you a functional example. So you look at the Department of Homeland Security's got something called the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. So essentially, the Department of Homeland Security centrally monitors the cybersecurity events at hundreds of agencies, of the civilian agencies. They use Elastic to do that. And the reason is they take these small clusters of Elastic and they deploy them at those agencies, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, and index the data locally. And if they're looking for a cyber threat, they can query that data where the data sits and just bring back the answer rather than pull the data. And the ingress-egress charges of moving that data around are prohibitively expensive. And you can't duplicate the data and replicate the data at that scale. You just can't do it. So that's why some of the largest agencies in government are standardized on Elastic. We call that our data mesh architecture, which is a really unique capability that we have. The other thing that we do that's unique is because now I'm getting a little too technical.
No, that's good.
As we index the data, we index it on write, which means that when you bring the data into our system, we
instead of
analyze it then on read, yes. So what that allows us to do is build a table of contents of the data as we bring it in. Now that we have that table of contents of the data, you can immediately put it in your lowest cost storage, your object storage, your S3 storage, your blob storage. But because we have that table of contents, we can still search the data. So
you have access to it to search, even though you know where to search for it.
You got it. So it allows us to search it, even though it's in long-term frozen storage or cheapest storage. So that storage cost offset that we can bring, the infrastructure cost offset, is huge when you start to look at, it's really significant.
Why is it so much cheaper?
Because a lot of the other folks that are in our space that are indexing data, so there's a requirement in government called M2131. So your year worth of data.
I'm more familiar with M2129, but I'm old school.
Okay, all right.
M2130, yes, please.
Yeah, so M2131 mandates that a government agency has to be able to search at least a year's worth of data. For our competitors to be able to do that, they have to keep it in their what they call their warm or their hot tier storage, which is very expensive, right? That's on demand, it's in RAM. Because we're able to put it in object storage, which is much, much cheaper for that amount of data and still make it searchable, we can help them meet that requirement. It really reduces the cost. The other cool thing that we just did, and we just announced this 6 months ago, is we're always trying to figure out how to reduce the cost of the data volume. And we came up with a way to compress the log data. So we call it, the feature's called Logs DB. And we're seeing compression, our CEO was just up on stage, 70% compression in some cases of log data. So we can really reduce the infrastructure cost associated with data storage.
One of the things we talk about in the public sector so much is the increasing amounts of data, and the pace at which that's increasing. Is that happening in government too?
Oh yes, yeah. Especially if you look at let's look at cybersecurity for example. We're increasingly ingesting data from various sources into the cybersecurity environment. Look at the zero trust mandate, right? Where we have to build these architectures that not only include your traditional security data, but also a lot of your network operations data into a common architecture, and you have to have a visibility layer across all of that, and an analytics layer across all of that. In order to do that, you have to, and again, part of the problem is because you have all these valuable data coming in, part of the challenge is our customers deploy multiple tools, just like they have in the private sector, and they pay to index the data multiple times. Our argument is, hey, consolidate those tools, index the data once, and then use it multiple times.
Wait, explain why they have to index it many times.
Well, because they want different tool capabilities, so they buy a tool for cybersecurity, so they index all the data in the cybersecurity tool. Then they want to do log metrics and tracing, so they index the data into a log metrics and tracing tool. They want to do generative AI, so they index it to a vector search platform. Our argument is, index it once, we're an open standards architecture, index it once into Elastic, use our open standards, and then use it for your different use cases, but don't re-index the data each time. So there's a huge cost saving there as well.
Does that make an install of Elastic, while it might be easy to get in, does it make you more sticky over time?
Yeah, it's actually...
Because every time a competitor might come in and say, oh, we can help you with this particular cyber, there's a new ransomware threat that no one else can deal with, we can help you with that. But the buyer might be like, we've already indexed the heck out of this stuff with Elastic, we're not going to do this.
We have integrations with all of the major vendors out there. So you look at Zero Trust, we can ingest CrowdStrike data or Okta data or Zscaler data or whatever. Again, because of the open source roots and because of the open architecture, we can index and ingest all that data. And then we also built this really cool tool that's AI enabled, essentially takes a large language model. And if there's a data set, in government there's lots of data sets that are non-standard that you want us to bring in, we can learn it, just like learning a new language. We can take a snapshot of the log data, import it into this LLM, and it will make a plugin for Elastic on the fly. So it's we're doing a lot to try to be as easy to ingest as possible.
Is the conversation on a sales basis changing now because of the change down the street here in the White House, and that efficiency is a real buzzword right now coming out of Washington, D.C. for the first time in a long time?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And I don't mean there's a political statement, I'm just saying that is part of the conversation.
It's really interesting, some of the things that are happening, and yes, all of our agencies are looking to gain efficiencies. Data is one of their big costs, so they're looking to drive the efficiencies. But
they always have been. But it seems like now it's more of a, well, you tell me, you're talking to them every day, I'm not.
We definitely are hearing from our customers that, let's say a customer's invested in a legacy tool for their threat hunting or cybersecurity platform. There's some really good tools out there, but they're really expensive and they're licensed purely on data volume, for example. We don't license on data volume. So we tend to be half or less of some of those other tools. So the government customers come to us and say, hey, we're already using you for vector search, we're using you for our log data. We'd like you guys to come in because we know you can take the data we've already ingest and give us the SIM and threat hunting capability at a third of what we're paying for this other vendor. So there's a definite opportunity for us to help drive those efficiencies from a hard cost standpoint. And then we've also built in some really cool AI tools for the SOC operators that improve their productivity.
Security
efficacy.
Operations Center.
Yes. I'm in Fed too long. Everything's an acronym.
I get it. I'm here to decipher.
Thank you.
It's my job.
Yes, but the security operations folks, the more that we can help automate with tools like AI, the more effective we can make them. Number one, you improve your security posture. Number two, you ramp people up more quickly. So those analysts are very hard to find, hard to retain.
Yeah.
So if we can make their jobs easier and help ramp up new hires in that space, a huge benefit to our customers.
I thought you were going to say the guys, now they have more time to work on their resume, so they can look for that other job because they're so high in demand.
Let's hope not. It seems like most of the cuts have not been focused on cyber and IT because, everything I've read, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, there's going to be a big pivot from cuts on personnel to investing in technology modernization, right? That's kind of the next phase that we're all expecting to see. But I do think there's going to be a push to open standards, which is fantastic, and a push to utilize more AI.
Yeah, and finally, let's get to AI. So I think that people who have a sort of general understanding of what goes on in technology aren't thinking of government as a place that's really leaning into AI, but we can see it in the spend.
Yeah.
Government's spending a lot of money in AI, and I think there must be a lot of attention. We're hearing that here at this Elastic Public Policy Summit, that people are talking about AI.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of folks use ChatGPT, so we all know the capability of ChatGPT. But you think about the efficiencies that in all aspects of government you can gain with a large language model. And I'll give you a really easy example. So Department of Veterans Affairs, they have a ton of information on their website. And they just announced something called the PACT Act, P-A-C-T. And what the PACT Act does is it extends benefits to veterans that served in the Middle East in a certain time frame, that around open burn pits, that type of thing, that are having health problems, right? So VA is a great organization in terms of supporting the veterans and adding new benefits to veterans that are having health issues.
And they got new funding for that as of what was it, last year?
Yeah. And they're doing a lot of advertising to make veterans aware that benefits exist. But when you go to the VA website and you search for, do I qualify for the PACT Act, like most, not only government websites, but private sector websites, you get pages of URLs that you got to search through and try to figure things out. So we were demonstrating to the VA how they could use a large language model, how they could use generative AI to make that more accessible. So one of our engineers just scraped the publicly available data on the VA website and used Elastic's vector search to do that. Then we applied a large language model on top of it and a chatbot that was natural language recognition, so you could talk to it, and you could say, hey, do I qualify for the PACT Act? I served in this part of the Middle East this year to this year.
In a conversational way, and maybe you misspelled PACT.
Just like that, just like that, misspelled, whatever. And it would immediately bring up the relevant answer, the accurate answer, and tell the veteran exactly like, yes, you qualify if you served from these years to in this part of the world and were exposed to this. And then the veteran could say, well, hey, how do I enroll? And it would give them the information to enroll. They say, well, can you email that to me? Here's my email address. And it would kick them an email with the links to be able to fill this stuff out. So it just makes it so much easier for the citizens to interact with our government agencies using things like large language models. And you think about the application for Social Security benefits or Medicare, any of those agencies, IRS, where folks are constantly interacting. We built a tool like this for ourselves at Elastic where it's a self-service for our customers. So if they come to Elastic to get support for a technical question or how to deploy or use Elastic, it first directs them if they want to use this AI assistant. And the customer satisfaction rate and the number of support cases that are just handled through this AI assistant now is off the charts.
It's got to feel great too. Like it's not like you're selling widgets, right? I mean, this is. Imagine what that does for that veteran who's suffering with their health and needs help, and maybe doesn't have the capacity to search through a freaking website to scroll through 50 links because they're just exhausted and sick.
Yeah, and I've been working in public sector in one capacity or another for 22 years now, and that's what gets me out of bed every day when you're working for a technology company that can have a meaningful impact on the mission of government, right? There's lots of technology that government needs, right? And some of it's impactful, some of it isn't, but the things that we're doing at Elastic can have a meaningful direct impact on the mission of our customers, and that's what gets me excited.
Great stuff. Chris Townsend here in Washington, D.C. at the Public Sector Summit from Elastic.